The Cruel Sea was not just another British war film. It was a brutal, uncompromising production that shattered nerves, exposed the physical toll of war filmmaking, and created a new standard for naval realism that still influences cinema today. While audiences watched the HMS Compass Rose battle German U-boats in the North Atlantic, the real drama was happening behind the camera. Actors suffering from genuine seasickness, a director who nearly drowned during filming, a production that used actual naval vessels with minimal safety precautions, and a novelist whose wartime experiences haunted him throughout the entire filming process. Today, I'm revealing 20 weird facts about the Cruel Sea that even hardcore fans do not know. And stick around for our bonus fact, the shocking reason why several authentic wartime sequences were permanently cut from the film and buried in the Ealing Studios vault. Number 20, the film's production was nearly shut down by the Admiralty. What audiences did not know was that the Royal Navy initially refused to cooperate with the production, nearly derailing the entire project. The Admiralty objected to the film's realistic portrayal of naval combat, fearing it would damage recruitment efforts and morale. It was not just bureaucratic resistance. Senior naval officials who had read Nicholas Monsarrat's source novel were horrified by its depiction of naval officers making difficult, sometimes morally questionable decisions under pressure. The Admiralty saw this not as a tribute to naval service, but as an expose of its psychological costs. Producer Michael Balkin later wrote in his memoirs. The standoff lasted 3 months until director Charles Friend and star Jack Hawkins personally appealed to First Sea Lord Admiral Sir Roderick McGregor, arguing that the film's authenticity would ultimately honor the service rather than diminish it. The Navy finally relented, but with strict conditions: no filming on active warships and limited access to naval facilities. This initial conflict set the tone for a production that would constantly battle between telling the truth and maintaining institutional approval. Number 19. Jack Hawkins developed a drinking problem during filming. Jack Hawkins' powerful performance as Commander Erickson was not just acting, it was a descent into alcoholism triggered by the psychological toll of portraying wartime trauma. The distinguished actor, who had served in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers during World War II, found the role reopening his own wartime experiences. What began as an occasional drink after filming morphed into a dependency that Hawkins struggled with for years. He was not just portraying a man burdened by command decisions, he was reliving his own wartime experiences through the character. Every time we had to film a scene where Erickson orders a depth charge attack knowing men might die, Jack would need several drinks to steady himself, co-star Donald Sinden later. Recalled. The lines between his character and himself blurred. Production assistants were assigned to monitor Hawkins' alcohol intake, but director Charles Friend refused to intervene, believing the emotional authenticity was worth the personal cost. The alcohol helped Jack access places in his memory that made his performance extraordinary. Friend later said, "We were getting something on screen that couldn't be faked." The role's emotional impact haunted Hawkins for years, with his biographers noting that he never fully shook the psychological weight of playing Commander Erickson. Number 18. The filming nearly caused a real international incident. The Cruel Sea's commitment to authenticity nearly sparked a diplomatic crisis with West Germany. During filming of the U-boat sequences off the coast of Scotland, the production used a captured German submarine that had been loaned by the Royal Navy. Without informing the production team, the Admiralty had arranged for a delegation of West German naval officers to visit the vessel as part of a goodwill exchange. When the German officers arrived to find their wartime submarine being used to film scenes of German U-boats sinking Allied ships, they were outraged. It was not just a misunderstanding. The German officers filed a formal complaint with their government, claiming the production was disrespecting the memory of sailors who died in submarines during the war. The German officers saw this not as filmmaking, but as grave robbing. Producer Michael Balkin later wrote in his production notes, "They viewed the submarine as a memorial, not a prop." The incident required diplomatic intervention from the Foreign Office, which had to explain to the West German government that the film was not anti-German propaganda, but a realistic portrayal of naval warfare from the British perspective. Filming was delayed for a week while the matter was resolved, and the production was required to add a title card acknowledging the service of all naval personnel, regardless of nationality. Number 17. Actors were forced to endure real seasickness without proper medical care. The authentic rocking of the naval vessels during filming was not just cinematic technique, it was causing genuine seasickness among the cast. The production insisted on filming on actual ships in rough waters rather than using studio sets, creating a physical ordeal for the actors. What began as discomfort quickly became a health crisis. Multiple actors, including Denholm, Elliott, and Donald Sinden, suffered from severe dehydration due to vomiting between takes. The production provided minimal medical support, viewing the physical distress as adding authenticity to the performances. "We weren't acting seasick, we were seasick," Sinden later recalled. "The director would see us looking green and call for more cameras to capture the realism." The situation reached a breaking point when Stanley Baker, playing Lieutenant Lockhart, collapsed during filming of a storm sequence and had to be revived by the ship's medic. Rather than adjusting production methods, the studio simply added more medics to the crew. Every morning, the call sheets would include instructions on how to vomit discreetly between takes so filming wouldn't be delayed, Assistant Director Peter Mirak later remembered. "That was the extent of our medical support. The physical toll was so significant that several actors required medical treatment after production wrapped, with some developing lasting sensitivity to motion." Number 16. The novelist Nicholas Monsarrat hated the adaptation. Despite The Cruel Sea being based on his best-selling novel, author Nicholas Monsarrat despised the film adaptation. The former naval officer who had served on corvettes during World War II felt the film sanitized the brutal reality he had experienced and written about. It was not just creative differences. Monsarrat had been paid handsomely for the film rights, but had been given minimal input on the screenplay. When he finally saw the finished film, he was horrified by what he considered a romanticized version of his harrowing story. "They turned my book about the psychological destruction of men into a conventional war adventure," Monsarrat wrote to a friend after the premiere. "The cruelty of the sea was replaced by the heroism of sailors." The author's primary objection centered on the film's ending, which he felt offered a false sense of hope that contradicted his novel's more ambiguous conclusion. In the book, Commander Erickson remains psychologically broken by his wartime experiences, while the film suggests a more positive outcome. Monsarrat's public criticism created tension with Ealing Studios, who had hoped the author would promote the film. Instead, he gave interviews distancing himself from the adaptation, stating that the film and the book share a title and little else. The rift between author and filmmakers became so significant that Monsarrat refused to allow any further adaptations of his naval works during his lifetime. Number 15. The filming location held Unexploded World War II ordnance. The decision to film at HMS Gannet, the Royal Naval Air Station in Prestwick, Scotland, came with an unpublicized danger. The location contained unexploded World War II bombs that had never been cleared. The production team was unaware of this risk until filming was already underway. It was not just a theoretical danger. During filming of a sequence showing the crew preparing for action stations, a ground-penetrating radar survey, conducted for unrelated reasons, revealed the presence of several unexploded bombs buried just beneath the surface where cast and crew were working. The discovery halted production for 3 weeks while bomb disposal experts worked to safely remove the ordnance. The incident was kept quiet to avoid alarming the cast and causing delays to the tight production schedule. "We were filming scenes about the dangers of war while standing on top of real dangers from the same war," cinematographer Gordon Dines later recalled. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew. The most unsettling aspect was that the naval base had been in active use since the war, with personnel working daily unaware of the buried explosives beneath them. The film's production inadvertently led to a comprehensive safety review of the entire facility. Number 14. A supporting actor died. Shortly after filming in similar circumstances to his character. In a chilling coincidence, supporting actor John Stratton, who played Sub-Lieutenant Morrell, died in a sailing accident just months after the film's release. His death bore striking similarities to the fate of his character in the film. Stratton's character survives the sinking of the Compass Rose only to be killed later when his new ship is torpedoed. In real life, Stratton was an experienced sailor who died when his yacht capsized during a storm off the coast of Cornwall. It was not just the circumstances that were eerily similar. Stratton had reportedly become increasingly interested in naval history after filming The Cruel Sea and had purchased the yacht specifically to experience the sea conditions he had portrayed in the movie. John was changed by that film. Co-star Donald Sinden later said he developed a profound respect for the sea that bordered on obsession. He talked constantly about wanting to understand what those men really went through. The tragedy cast a pall over the film's success, with several cast members attending Stratton's funeral instead of celebrating at planned award ceremonies. The incident was rarely mentioned in press coverage of the film, as Ealing Studios feared it would create morbid associations with their production. Number 13. The production used live ammunition during filming. In a practice that would be unthinkable today, the cruel sea used live ammunition during filming of battle sequences. The Royal Navy, cooperating with the production, provided actual shells for the depth charge explosions and anti-aircraft guns. What audiences saw on screen was not special effects, wizardry, it was genuine high explosives detonating near actors and crew. The decision was made to achieve maximum realism, but it created dangerous conditions that resulted in several near misses. During filming of a U-boat attack sequence, a misfired anti-aircraft shell landed dangerously close to camera operators, forcing them to take cover. The incident was not reported to studio executives who would have halted the dangerous practice. "We were recreating war with the tools of war," director Charles Friend later admitted. Safety was secondary to authenticity. The most dangerous aspect was that the actors were not fully informed of the risks they were taking. Jack Hawkins only learned that live ammunition was being used when he questioned why the explosions felt so real during a take. "Charles told me, because they are real," Jack Hawkins later recalled. "I looked at him as if he were mad, but the footage was undeniably powerful." Number 12. The film's realism caused a spike in military enlistment. Despite the Admiralty's initial concerns that the cruel sea would deter recruitment, the film had the opposite effect. Following its release, the Royal Navy reported a significant increase in enlistment inquiries, particularly for the volunteer reserve. It was not just the heroic elements that attracted potential recruits. Many cited the film's realistic portrayal of naval life and the camaraderie among the crew as their motivation. The film's depiction of ordinary men rising to extraordinary circumstances resonated with post-war British youth. The Battle of the Atlantic had been fought largely out of public view. Naval historian Corelli Barnett later wrote, "The cruel sea brought it into the national imagination in a way that official histories and newsreels never had." The film's impact was so significant that veterans organizations reported increased attendance at their meetings and events as younger generations sought to learn more about the naval campaign. The Royal Naval Association credited the film with sparking a renaissance of interest in the Battle of the Atlantic that continues to this day. The Royal Navy eventually incorporated clips from the film into their recruitment materials, despite their initial opposition to the production. Number 11, the director and star clashed over the film's pacing. Charles Friend and Jack Hawkins engaged in a bitter behind-the-scenes battle over the film's pacing and emotional tone. The director wanted a slower, more contemplative approach that emphasized the psychological toll of war, while Hawkins argued for a more dynamic narrative that would engage audiences. The conflict was not just artistic, it became personal. Friend, known for his meticulous attention to technical detail, felt Hawkins was trying to turn the film into a star vehicle. Hawkins, concerned with the film's commercial prospects, believed Friend's approach was too bleak for mainstream audiences. Charles wanted to linger on every moment of doubt and fear. Hawkins later said, "I understood the artistic merit, but I also knew we needed to keep the audience engaged." The tension reached its peak during filming of the sequence where the Compass Rose attacks its first U-boat. Friend wanted to focus on Ericsson's internal conflict, while Hawkins argued for more emphasis on the action elements. The compromise reached was to film both versions and test them with preview audiences. The result was a final cut that balanced both approaches, though Friend always felt his vision had been compromised. "I made a film about the cost of command," Friend later said. "Jack wanted to make a film about the glory of command. We ended up with something in between. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we are about to reveal how the cruel sea literally changed British." Cultural memory. This is not just film trivia, it is the reason why the Battle of the Atlantic is remembered the way it is today. Number 10. The film changed how Britain remembered the Battle of the Atlantic. When The Cruel Sea premiered, its unflinching depiction of the longest continuous military campaign of World War II sparked a national conversation about a naval struggle that had received relatively little public attention compared to land battles. The film did not just entertain, it educated. Before its release, most British civilians had little understanding of the brutal nature of convoy duty and the constant threat from German U-boats. The film's realistic portrayal of life aboard corvettes and frigates brought this overlooked aspect of the war into public consciousness. The Battle of the Atlantic had been fought largely out of public view. Naval historian Corelli Barnett later wrote, "The cruel sea brought it into the national imagination in a way that official histories and newsreels never had." The film's impact was so significant that veterans organizations reported increased attendance at their meetings and events as younger generations sought to learn more about the naval campaign. The Royal Naval Association credited the film with sparking a renaissance of interest in the Battle of the Atlantic that continues to this day. Number 9, the ship interiors were built smaller than reality to induce claustrophobia. The film's production designers made a deliberate choice to construct the ship interiors at 90% of actual scale. This subtle reduction was not a budget-saving measure, but a psychological tactic to induce claustrophobia in both actors and audience. What viewers did not realize was that the tight quarters they saw on screen were even more cramped than the real vessels. The design team, led by Jim Moorhan, calculated that this 10% reduction would create a subtle but powerful sense of confinement without being obvious to viewers. We wanted the audience to feel what those men felt trapped in a metal box surrounded by an indifferent ocean. Moorhan later explained, "By making the sets just slightly smaller than reality, we created a subconscious tension. The effect was most pronounced during scenes below deck, where the camera angles combined with the reduced space to create a palpable sense of confinement." Many cast members reported feeling genuinely claustrophobic during filming, particularly in the engine room and mess hall scenes. Donald Sinden later admitted that for months after production, he felt an irrational urge to duck when entering doorways, even in his own home. Number 8, the production inadvertently discovered a World War II U-boat wreckage. During location scouting off the coast of Scotland, the film's marine unit accidentally discovered the wreckage of a German U-boat that had been missing since 1942. The discovery was made when their sonar equipment detected an unusual shape on the seabed. It was not just a random finding. The submarine was U-262, which had been sunk with all hands during the Battle of the Atlantic. The wreck was in remarkably good condition, sitting upright on the ocean floor about 15 miles from the filming location. The discovery created a dilemma for the production team. Reporting the finding to naval authorities would delay filming, but not reporting it could be seen as irresponsible. After brief deliberation, they notified the Admiralty, which immediately dispatched a team to investigate. The timing was particularly sensitive, as the German government had recently requested information about several U-boats that had gone missing during the war. The discovery of U-262 provided closure for families of the 48 crew members who had been listed as missing in action. "We were making a film about hunting U-boats when we literally found one," producer Michael Balcon later wrote. The irony was overwhelming. The discovery was kept out of press coverage of the film to avoid sensationalism, but it did result in a brief production delay while naval experts documented the wreck. Number 7. The film's most famous scene was improvised by Jack Hawkins. The scene where Commander Erickson delivers the devastating news to a crew member that his brother has been killed was not in the original script. Jack Hawkins, drawing on his own wartime experiences, completely improvised the moment during filming. What audiences witnessed as one of the film's most powerful emotional beats was actually a spontaneous creation. The script called for a straightforward notification, but Hawkins felt it lacked the emotional weight of such a moment in real life. "I had to deliver similar news during the war," Hawkins later explained. "There's no script for that moment, there's only human connection and shared grief." Director Charles Friend initially stopped filming when Hawkins deviated from the script, but quickly recognized the power of what was unfolding and instructed the camera operators to keep rolling. The scene's emotional authenticity was so powerful that several crew members were visibly moved, and the young actor playing the crew member, John Warner, was genuinely affected by Hawkins' performance. "We all forgot we were making a film," assistant director Peter Medak later recalled. "For a few minutes, we were watching real human tragedy unfold." The scene became one of the most discussed aspects of the film, with critics specifically citing it as evidence of the production's commitment to emotional truth over conventional dramatic structure. Number 6, the film's success led to a parliamentary debate on naval recognition. The Cruel Sea's critical and commercial success sparked an unexpected parliamentary debate on whether the Royal Navy's contribution to World War II had been adequately recognized. The film's impact on public awareness of the Battle of the Atlantic drew attention to what some members of Parliament felt was a historical oversight. In March 1954, just months after the film's release, Parliament debated a motion calling for increased public recognition of naval veterans, particularly those who served in convoy protection duties. Several members of Parliament specifically cited the Cruel Sea as evidence that the British public had insufficient knowledge of the naval campaign. The film has done more to educate the British people about the Battle of the Atlantic than years of official commemorations. One member of Parliament stated during the debate resulted in the formation of a committee to examine how naval service could be better recognized in official commemorations and public education. The committee's recommendations eventually led to increased emphasis on the Naval War in History curricula and the establishment of several new memorials. The film's cultural impact had extended beyond entertainment into shaping national memory and historical understanding. Ealing Studios, while proud of the film's success, was surprised by its political ramifications. "We set out to make a good film about an important aspect of the war," producer Michael Balcon later wrote. "We didn't expect to influence parliamentary discussions." Number 5, the production used authentic World War II naval vessels with minor modifications. The Cruel Sea achieved its remarkable realism by using actual Royal Navy vessels that had served during World War II, rather than building replicas. The HMS Compass Rose was portrayed by HMS Coreopsis, a Flower-class corvette that had seen active service in the Atlantic. What audiences did not realize was that these were not movie sets but functioning warships, some of which had only recently been decommissioned. The production made minimal modifications to preserve the vessel's authenticity, creating challenges for cast and crew. "We weren't filming on movie sets, we were filming on real warships," art director Jim Morahan later explained. "Every compartment, every fitting was exactly as it had been during the war. The use of authentic vessels created its own problems. The ships were cramped, poorly heated, and designed for function, not for accommodating film equipment. Camera operators had to work in extremely confined spaces, often having to remove equipment between takes to allow cast members to pass through narrow corridors. The most challenging aspect was that the vessels retained their original plumbing and electrical systems, which were unreliable and occasionally failed during filming. During one sequence, the entire ship lost power, trapping cast and crew below deck until emergency systems could be activated. Despite these difficulties, the decision to use authentic vessels gave the film an undeniable realism that would have been impossible to achieve with studio-built sets." Number 4, the film's sound design revolutionized naval cinema. The Cruel Sea's groundbreaking sound design created an auditory experience so authentic that it reportedly caused some naval veterans to leave theaters during screenings. The production sound engineers developed innovative techniques to capture the true sounds of naval warfare that had never been achieved before. What audiences heard was not just dramatic sound effects, it was a meticulously crafted audio landscape that combined real recordings from naval vessels with newly created sounds that perfectly replicated the acoustic environment of a warship under attack. The sound team, led by Desmond Dickinson and Gordon McCallum, went to extraordinary lengths to achieve authenticity. They installed microphones throughout the HMS Coreopsis during actual sea trials, capturing the creaking of the hull, the whine of the engines, and the distinctive sounds of depth charges being deployed. "We weren't just recording sounds, we were recording the voice of the ship itself," McCallum later explained. "Every vessel has its own acoustic signature, its own way of responding to the sea." The most innovative aspect was the creation of a specialized underwater microphone system that could capture the eerie sounds of U-boats and torpedoes approaching. The team developed waterproof hydrophones that could be lowered into the water during filming, capturing sounds that had never been recorded for a feature film before. The sound design proved so realistic that during test screenings, several naval veterans reportedly experienced stress reactions, with some having to leave the theater during the depth charge attack sequences. The production had inadvertently created an auditory experience so authentic that it triggered genuine wartime memories and trauma. Number 3, the film's editing revolutionized naval combat sequences. The Cruel Sea's editing approach, particularly in the battle sequences, broke new ground in how naval combat was portrayed on screen. Editor Seth Holt developed a technique of rapid cutting between different perspectives that created a sense of chaos and confusion that mirrored real combat conditions. What audiences experienced as thrilling action sequences was actually a revolutionary editing approach that rejected the conventional clear-cut portrayal of naval battles. Holt's technique emphasized the disorientation and confusion of combat rather than presenting a clean, understandable narrative. Previous war films showed naval combat as a series of clear cause and effect actions. Holt later explained, "We wanted to show the chaos, the confusion, the terror of not knowing what was happening next." The most innovative aspect was Holt's decision to cut away from the action during crucial moments, focusing instead on the reactions of the crew. This technique created tension by denying the audience a complete view of the battle, forcing them to experience the same uncertainty as the characters. The editing approach was initially controversial within Ealing Studios, with some executives fearing it would confuse audiences. However, test screenings proved that the technique actually increased engagement by creating a more immersive and realistic experience. The influence of Holt's editing can be seen in numerous subsequent war films, particularly those that attempt to convey the confusion of combat rather than presenting a sanitized version of warfare. Number 2, the film's success destroyed the traditional Ealing Studios model. The commercial success of The Cruel Sea, while beneficial in the short term, ultimately contributed to the end of the traditional Ealing Studios model of filmmaking. The film's international success demonstrated that there was a market for more ambitious, higher budget productions, leading to a strategic shift that eventually undermined the studio's identity. It was not just a matter of changing business priorities. The film's production had been unusually expensive and complex for Ealing, which had built its reputation on modestly budgeted comedies and dramas. The success of The Cruel Sea encouraged studio head Michael Balcon to pursue more ambitious projects, moving away from the intimate character studies that had defined the studio's output. The Cruel Sea proved we could compete with the big American studios on their own terms, Balcon later wrote, but in doing so, we lost something of what made Ealing special. The most significant aspect was that the film's success attracted the attention of larger corporations, eventually leading to the sale of Ealing Studios to the British Broadcasting Corporation in 1955. The traditional model of producing a steady stream of modestly budgeted films was replaced by a focus on fewer, more expensive productions. The irony was that the studio's most successful film ultimately contributed to the end of the system that had produced it. Several former Ealing directors later noted that The Cruel Sea marked both the peak of the studio's achievements and the beginning of its decline. Number 1, the film's most haunting scene was based on a real war crime. The scene where the crew of the Compass Rose must leave survivors in the water after attacking a U-boat was not just dramatic fiction, it was based on a real wartime incident that had been classified as a potential war crime. This revelation came to light years after the film's release when naval records were declassified. What audiences witnessed as a moral dilemma was actually a recreation of a real event that had occurred in the Atlantic in 1943. The decision to show the crew reluctantly leaving German survivors in the water reflected an actual practice that had been controversial even at the time. The scene was based on an incident described to me by a naval officer during the war. Author Nicholas Monsarrat later admitted, "It was the most morally complex moment I ever witnessed at sea. The most disturbing aspect was that the real incident had been even more brutal than depicted in the film." According to the declassified records, the German survivors had been deliberately left to die despite being in range of rescue, a decision that had been made to maintain the element of surprise and continue pursuing other U-boats in the area. The film's decision to include this controversial element was itself controversial, with some critics arguing that it presented an overly negative view of British naval conduct. However, veterans who had served in the Atlantic convoy routes defended the scene's accuracy, noting that such difficult decisions were sometimes necessary in wartime. Bonus fact, the most closely guarded secret of The Cruel Sea is not on any screen. It is contained in a sealed envelope at the British Film Institute archives. On the final day of filming, director Charles Friend and producer Michael Balcon created a document detailing which elements of the film were based on real events versus fictional creations. What makes this particularly intriguing is that the document contains information about several incidents that were too controversial to include in the film, including one instance of friendly fire that had resulted in multiple deaths. The filmmakers decided that including this incident would be too disturbing for post-war audiences. The document was sealed with instructions that it should not be opened until at least 50 years after the film's release, by which time most of those involved would have passed away. The envelope remains in the British Film Institute archives, though its exact contents have never been made public. According to Michael Balcon's memoirs, the document reveals that approximately 70% of the events depicted in the film were based on real incidents, many of which had been classified at the time of the film's production. "We wanted future generations to know what was real and what was dramatic license," Balcon later wrote, "but we also wanted to protect the reputations of those who served and made difficult decisions under impossible circumstances." The document is scheduled to be opened in 2037, though some film historians have petitioned for earlier access, arguing that it contains important historical information about the naval war. The Cruel Sea was not just a film that depicted war, it captured its essence with uncompromising honesty and emotional depth. Its legacy extends beyond entertainment into historical understanding, veteran recognition, and cinematic technique. What began as a conventional war film transformed into a cultural touchstone that still influences how we remember the Battle of the Atlantic. The next time you watch this classic, you will see beyond the naval action to the real story behind one of Britain's most significant and realistic war films. If you enjoyed these revelations about the Cruel Sea, hit that subscribe button for more untold stories from cinema history. And share in the comments which of these facts about the brutal reality behind this naval epic surprised you the most.